All right, guys. So I've been doing some more research into the situation with Alec Baldwin. All right. I think I know what happened. All right. So let's go ahead and check out a few minutes of this. All right. Because this ties into the next video we're going to see. All right. And then I'm going to tell you guys exactly what I think happened here. All right. To be more specific, the reason why the gun discharged.
Baldwin or others could be charged with another crime like negligent use of a deadly weapon. Well, negligent use of a deadly weapon consists of 1. Discharging the firearm into any building or vehicle or so as to knowingly endanger a person or his property. 2. Carrying a firearm while under the influence of an intoxicant or narcotic. 3. Endangering the safety of another by handling or using a firearm or other deadly weapon in a negligent manner. Or 4. Discharging a firearm within 150 yards of a dwelling or building. Now, subsection 3 may be in place.
Negligent manner, all right, is definitely going to be at play here. If my theory holds true, there's no way that's not going to be an important factor. All right.
In this case. An early report said that the New Mexico police were trying to determine whether the gun would be considered, quote, a deadly weapon. And based on what we know about prop guns and firing dummy rounds and the fact that they may have actually been using real guns with fake ammunition, one would think the answer in this case could be yes. And some members of the Rust crew have put the blame on the assistant director. A script assistant who called 911 said,
This mother, did you see him lean over my table and yell at me? He's supposed to check the guns. He's responsible for what happened.
and there were also prior complaints about unsafe working conditions on the Rust set. On October 16th, the union that represents people who work on theater and film crews nearly went on strike over bad working conditions. The IATSE crew cited low wages, long hours, and unsafe sets. The Rust crew said that the set
So for everyone who walked off the set in protest saying that it was unsafe, their testimony is going to be really important, as well as everyone who was there. All right. Uh, Especially the people who were there at the time when it happened. All right. But anyone who walked off the set in protest, their testimony is also going to be really important. All right.
was unsafe, echoing many of the concerns that IATSE had when it threatened to strike. And just hours before the shooting, 7 camera crew members working on Rust walked off the set to protest low pay and long hours. Crew members had been told that the producers would pay for them to stay in hotel rooms in Santa Fe, but when they arrived on set, they were told that they would be staying in Albuquerque. That's a 1-hour drive from the film set. That means that crew would have to drive 1 hour to work, then be on set for 12 to 13 hours, and then drive for another hour back to Albuquerque. They were allegedly only getting 5 hours of sleep. The crew also said their paycheck
This is a even bigger issue than I thought of at first, right? When I first heard this, I thought, okay, well, that's not very good, but there's not like an inherent danger or risk, right? But there is, and it's called fatigue. Um, this is the reason why pilots, why truck drivers, why so many other people who are operating heavy machinery or in public transportation, things like that, they cannot work like this. All right. Um, but to take it a step further, if you are handling firearms, whether there's, you know, everything's completely safe, there's no live ammunition whatsoever, it doesn't matter. You should not be fatigued at all and be on a set where there is potentially dangerous weapons. All right. So yeah, if fatigue is not in the criteria for movie sets, especially ones where it is involving dangerous weapons, um, then yeah, it needs to be. All right. You cannot have people on sets where there is any minute possibility of anything being dangerous. You can't have people fatigued on that set. All right, that is a huge liability.
Checks had been delayed. And 3 crew members told the LA Times that they were concerned with gun safety because there had already been 2 accidental prop gun discharges. Quote, there were no safety meetings, there was no assurance that it wouldn't happen again. All they wanted to do was rush, rush, rush. One anonymous.
That line right there had stumped me before, and I talked to my brother about it too, and we couldn't really understand what that meant. Rust crew describes on-set gun safety issues and misfires days before fatal shooting. So what do they mean by misfire? A gun shooting by itself, like you set it on a table and then it shoots? Because that would be a misfire. All right. What I think they were trying to say is that while they're handling these guns, they were shooting unintentionally. Okay. But I think that is because none of these guys knew enough about guns, especially these types of guns, to be handling them. All right. That explains the target practice they were doing. All right. I think these guys were all amateurs and they were trying to learn more about guns without having anyone there to supervise and to, they didn't have any gun experts. So I think for the armorer, I think she was just inexperienced. As simple as that. I think seeing that there was live ammunition, right, on set, that should have been the end of it right there. All right. At that point, everything gets shut down. All filming stops. You take inventory. You collect everything. All right. And then on an actual set, they would probably shut the set down for several days as they start to investigate and start to try to figure out who brought this ammunition in here, who else is corrupting the safety of this movie set, who is doing that, because we need to get them out of here. All right. So that didn't happen. Even people protesting and leaving the set, that still didn't happen. Even people saying these guns are not safe, that still didn't happen. So let me now go ahead and show you why I think these guns were misfiring. All right, which is not actually a misfire. If the theory is correct of what was actually going on here, then they're not misfires. That was by design of why these guns were behaving this way. But they didn't know enough about the equipment they were handling. And that's step number 1. All right? You have to know how a gun is going to function before you start playing with it. All right? Especially if you're going to put live ammunition in it. So we're looking at a video from Brandon. All right? So he tried to get a gun to go off without pulling the trigger. All right. He could not do it. He tried beating on the hammer. He tried all kinds of stuff. It was not happening. All right. But the last thing that he tried, and this is his theory, and I think he's 100% correct. Everything fits together. All right. Even what the crew said about the misfires, that even fits together.
Energy than the typical blank round that should be used on every Hollywood set. Moving on. So in the accidental shooting in question involving this gun, Alec Baldwin in later interviews more recently has claimed that he did not pull the trigger, as he would never point a weapon at anyone and pull the trigger. Now, those of us with a basic understanding of firearms and or physics knows that at least one of those two things is physically impossible, and or both, considering that a live firearm was discharged and hit a...
Right. At some point, you messed up.
people. But now let's go ahead and test to see if it is possible to fire this weapon without having pulled the trigger. Now, one of the things on the 45 long Colt single action Army model 1873, near the trigger, we have a live round aligned with the barrel and the hammer here. And I don't have a hammer. I meant to bring a hammer out here to just show that, see if you can get this to go off without fucking puncturing the side of my... There you go. So let's try another method. So we're going to load up another live round here into the chamber, advance that forward, and now, as you can see here with the brass here, we are rotating that into place where that is now square behind the hammer. So the other possibility, and I think this is what Alec Baldwin is claiming happened, is he was practicing his cross draw and was pulling the hammer back, didn't pull the hammer back all the way, released it back forward, and that is what discharged the round. Which still doesn't explain why he was pointing a live firearm at another human being, but you know what? Semantics. That's for the lawyers to decide. Right now, we're just going to determine if that is a possible scenario, in which case this gun can fire. So we're going to...
It's not.
We're going to test that here. You know, put this to the test while we're in a, controlled and safe environment. YouTube, we are in a controlled and safe environment. Alrighty, let's give this a shot. So the trick is going to be pulling this back to the point where it doesn't start advancing the cylinder. All right, so it seems that point's about here. So let's try to... I don't think we're going to get anywhere on that, and for those asking why we couldn't go farther back and advance it to the next one, because these have something called half cock. So if you... let's go ahead and get that live round out of there so I can demonstrate this. Again, partially struck, you can actually see where this has had multiple impacts from that free-floating firing pin on the primer, but none of which were even remotely strong enough to actually strike the round. Next time I fire this, I'm going to show you guys so you can see what an actual struck round looks like. This is definitely making an impact, but it's nowhere close to being something that is fireable. So when your hammer's all the way forward, okay, you pull it back, that's full cock, right? Giggity. Half cock is when you pull it halfway back, and it has a little catch here, and this allows you to freely rotate the cylinder. Like if you've seen me pulling out the fired brass on this, I have it at half cock. This is just kind of a safety that allows the cylinder to freely move while not in danger of firing a round. It is also important to point out that you cannot pull the trigger on half cock. Because the cylinder is freely moving, if you fired any one of these rounds without it being perfectly aligned with the barrel, that's a great way to explode, which is why they do not allow you to pull the trigger while you have it in this setting. And if you pull the hammer any farther back than half cock without going to full cock, it just sets you right back to half cock. So that impact has to be made before you get to half cock, and realistically, it has to be before that cylinder starts to rotate. Otherwise, that primer does not align with the firing pin, so it doesn't even matter. So it has to be in this range here. All right, now, of course, just to show you, this is the round that we were striking earlier. This is still a live round. I am not flubbing anything. Put that back in the gun, and it is fireable. That is what a round looks like when it has been struck. So you see the indentation on the primer is significantly deeper. Something, the gun likes it when it's deeper, I don't know. Now I'm going to load up 3 more rounds real quick because I'm going to demonstrate what I think might have actually happened. I think this is the most plausible theory outside of intentional homicide, which I'd like not to think about. And quick shout out to Tim from Military Arms channel, because I think he just did a video, I think like a day before we filmed this, and I think he had a similar theory as to mine. I'm moving to an empty cylinder real quick just to demonstrate. On these old revolvers, it is possible to already have your finger on the trigger and not pull the trigger, but just have pressure on the trigger and pull the hammer back and completely miss the sear that disconnects the trigger there. So it is entirely possible that Mr. Baldwin was not actively like pulling the trigger, but just had his finger in the right place, drew his revolver, and fire it around. I'm not going to demonstrate that.
Makes perfect sense. And that is by design. All right.
With your finger on the trigger and a live round in the chamber, that's safe. And as it turns out, not good for your staff. But this in particular is why it is popular in Western movies to be able to fan revolvers. That is what allows that to happen. Now, of course, that's just my...
Now, of course, there's going to be people who do that a lot faster. All right. It almost sounds like a freaking machine gun when they get really, really good at it. So just to illustrate to you guys, this is not specific to the specific gun that he has. All right. Every similar styled weapon is going to behave that way. That is the disconnect that these guys did not have. That's what I think happened here. They did not understand that just a very little bit of pressure on that trigger and you pull the hammer all the way back, it's going to go ahead and fire. All right. They were trying to make a movie about cowboys without studying and watching cowboy movies and watching this mechanic as they go through, and like he just explained and showed you how it works. You hold the trigger, you put a very little bit of pressure on the trigger, and then you just keep pulling the hammer back really, really fast, and it's going to keep shooting. All right. They should have had at least one expert in there showing them and explaining to them. All right. As soon as they started noticing that the guns were going off without intending for them to go off, that's when the alarm bells should have rang for everybody, not just a few people who walked off the set in protest. All right. What I would say, they should have called the police. Because I have heard, I don't know how true it is, but I've heard that when they walked off the set, they told them someone is going to die. We don't want to be a part of it. I think at that point, they should have called the police and told them, you guys need to do an investigation. You guys need to shut this set down, because lives are literally at stake. Not trying to put blame on them, because, they obviously never been in a situation like this. I think in the future, if you're on a set or anything like that and you see things that are outright dangerous, and the people on the set aren't taking it seriously and are not having safety protocols, they're not having meetings going over, anything like that, then that's when you need to start calling the authorities and having someone come up there and start doing an investigation. All right. Hopefully this is the last time. Hopefully, after this, they're all going to start taking it more seriously. All right. I think most sets do. So there is still a few more questions that needs to get answered. I think we'll get those answers once this thing goes to trial. All right. The bottom line here, there should have been no live ammunition on set. None. It's the first mistake right there. If they wanted to learn and shoot these weapons, what they should have done is they should have went to a gun store and got hands-on experience in a safe environment, to have an instructor there to walk them through it, to show them safety protocols, to do all of that stuff. And they then, I'm pretty sure, would have explained to them if you have just a very little bit of pressure on that trigger and you pull the hammer all the way back, it's going to shoot. All right. That is what they should have done. So, all right. That's it for now, y'all.